Welcome to On the Bubble Podcast, episode 139. I'm your host, Tsubasa J. Ueda, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today, our episode is going to be on PT Yokohama metagame analysis for the CC and the Sage. We're also going to be talking about calling Memphis that happened this week. We'll basically tie our conversation from that into our CC metagame analysis for Yokohama. I don't think there's any more CC callings before PT Yokohama anymore, right?
No, yeah. So this is our last look at CC that we're going to get before the PT, at least as far as big events goes. I think it's not a showdown, a battlegrounds, the new ones. There's at least a battlegrounds in Portland this coming weekend. So I know about that, but there's not too much else as far as I know.
Okay, I guess we'll just move right in by asking how you did. But I guess before we do that, do you want to do a Patreon shout out?
Yeah, so thank you to all of our patrons who give back to the show. We couldn't be doing what we're doing without you, and your support is really incredible. So thank you so much. And thank you to all of our listeners who tune in each week and listen. I talked to quite a few people that, just mentioned that they enjoyed the podcast, and that's always nice. And that was the case at Memphis, is the case at most events that I'll talk to a few people. And that's always a highlight for us, is just meeting people who listen to the podcast and get some value out of it. So thank you to all of you for supporting the show and for helping out. If you want to check out Patreon, you can check us out at patreon.com/onthebobble. There's a holiday tier or a basic tier there that just sort of helps support the show, gives a little bit back. It's about the price of a cup of coffee. And then there's a titanium bobble tier that will subscribe you to get all of the content updates that come in. Or if you're just interested in one piece of content, you can buy the content pieces individually. Another way you can help get back to the show is if you're buying singles through invasioncnc.ca. This is my sponsor and also the sponsor of the podcast. They're one of the largest Canadian retailers for Flesh and Blood singles. You can use the code YLB5 at your checkout, and you'll get 5% off on all your singles. So that's a good way to save some money and also let them know that the show sent you there, and that helps support us as well. So thank you, everyone, so much.
Let's move right into it. So you went to Calling Memphis. Do you want to start with how you did before we talk about the metagame?
Yeah, so I brought Acilio. I've been practicing it for maybe 2 weeks or so leading up to this. I don't think I was the most practiced or prepared on this deck, but I wanted to bring it to see if it's a deck that I would want to play at the Pro Tour and get some more experience on it. So I went 8-4, finished, I think 27th, top 32. So I cashed and I got a World Tour point, which is it's solid. I'm not disappointed with the result, but I'm not ecstatic about it either. Overall, I had fun. I was pretty happy with my play. I do think it's funny that my losses, I don't think I necessarily played perfectly, but I don't think they were very winnable games. I lost by a huge amount. And the games where I actually noticed more mistakes were actually some of the games that I won. So I guess sometimes tournaments go like this, but it's something I've been feeling a little bit. The meta feels maybe on the swingier side to me right now.
I feel like Acilio in particular is one of those super swingy decks, right? As its pop-off turns does way too much damage, and when it doesn't do anything, you have 5 instants in hand, and you're just well, I have no option but to no block.
Yeah. Acilio definitely amplifies that. I kind of think we'll talk about it more as we get into it, but I kind of think a lot of the top decks are either super high ceiling and pretty volatile or fragile, and then various flavors of fatigue decks are kind of the two things that are in the format right now for the most part. There's some other stuff too, but those are the big characterizing aspects of the format, I think. And it kind of makes sense. You need the big ceiling to go over the fatigue decks, and then the big ceiling is hard to stop if you're playing super fair like Kasai or something. So those decks kind of get pushed out.
But otherwise, this meta is pretty wide, right? In comparison to maybe something that we've seen in the last couple of years. The most represented deck here, even at Calling Memphis here, is Vincent at 23 players at 8% of the metagame. And then Acilio also at 23 at 8%. 22 Victors at 7%. 21 Valda at 7% as well. So these 4 decks only make up about 30% of the metagame. And usually like we see in these callings, 4 decks can build up even like 40, maybe like 50% of the metagame. I think overall, this metagame is quite wide, right? Like, if you go to a tournament, you're going to be playing against a lot of different types of decks. Except maybe, unless you like include Victor and Vada to be like the same kind of deck, then you're going to be playing against a Guardian a couple of times and then a plethora of other decks.
Yeah. I do think there's like a notable amount of Guardian. There's also Pleiades in there at 11 copies. So there is quite a bit of Guardian. I'm curious. I do think that this is one of the more open meta games just in general. It feels like a lot of the decks have some bad matchups, and you kind of pick which ones you want to have as bad matchups. But I'm curious if the meta game will kind of coalesce and narrow a little bit as we go towards Pro Tour. I kind of think so. I think that there are some decks that seem to be, let's say, ahead of the pack compared to the others. But so far, the representation of decks has been super, super wide. There's been a ton of heroes being played. And honestly, it's pretty, I think that that's like fun. It's good for coverage. It's good for variety as you're playing the tournament. But yeah, very curious to see if how much that will continue as we go into Pro Tour Yokohama.
That's very fair. That's very fair. Did you want to talk about the rest of the metagame? We did kind of say that it is quite flat, so
we can finish the first column. We have, so after the Vincent, Acilio, Victor, Valda as the 4 most repped, all above 20. We have Arachne Marionette at 19 copies, Gravy Bones at 17, Arachne Huntsman at 15, Prism at 13, Dorenthia Iron Song at 12, Pleiades at 11, and Dash.io at 11. There are many other heroes in this tournament. I think for the most part, these heroes aren't super, super relevant to the metagame, though. They largely didn't do super well. I guess there are like a few other decks that maybe have some game, like Syndra, Katsu, Ira, and Teklo, who had a bit of a breakout event. Well, we'll talk about Teklo later. But for the most part, I think once you get past this kind of like first column of heroes that we mentioned that are the most repped, you start getting to what I would consider like quite a bit weaker options. I think that if you are looking to win the Pro Tour, these other heroes are probably not the ones that you want to be bringing.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. At least for the calling, though, they are quite represented. You're probably going to be facing them. Like everything in the second column, there's at least 5 copies of them. So the chances you play against some of these other decks is quite high too, because it does still make up like 30% of the metagame. Let's move on and talk about the conversion of day 2. So who did convert to day 2, and what was the most converting decks?
We'll go by number of copies, but we'll also talk about the percentage, because there's, as always, there's some low repped heroes that converted high percentage because they're low repped. The most notable ones, I think, are Acilio in first with 10 copies and 43% conversion, which is really, really impressive. And also Arachne Marionette with 9 copies and a 47% conversion rate. These were 2 of the more represented decks. Acilio with 23 at most repped, and Arachne Marionette at 19, not very far behind, just 4 less copies. So seeing them convert above 40% is really, really impressive. And like the benchmark for conversion for this event is right around 21%, I believe. It was 64 of 297 players. So yeah,
about 1 in 5.
Yeah, about 1 in 5, just over 1 in 5. And so yeah, 40%, well above that. And I think whenever you see a well-represented deck also have a high conversion rate, that's usually a good signifier that that deck is probably very strong.
Yeah, that is very true. Even right underneath it, Victor at 6 copies with 27%. That is like just above the conversion line that we just talked about, which is still a good deck, right? Like Vincent at 6 copies with 26%, Pleiades at 4 copies at 36%, 4 copies of Dash at 36%. All these decks, all 6 decks here are just like very, very good. But like when we look at the percentages of Acilio and Arachne, like that's still 10%, 20% above these good decks. So that's a pretty big jump, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I kind of think that we'll see, but my suspicion is that Acilio and Marionette are kind of the top two decks. I think that we kind of have like a top five deck situation, but those two stand out to me. And I don't just say that because of the numbers. I was feeling this way before the tournament as well, but those two stand out to me as sort of maybe two of the strongest options.
That's fair. And I think talking about something else would be the other side, which will be the outliers that underperformed in this tournament. Which will be the biggest one will be Arachne Huntsman. There's one copy, so 7% of Huntsman day 2'd, and then two Gravy Bones, only 12% of them day 2ing as well. So these two decks were pretty represented. They had 17 Gravies and 15 Arachne, but only 1 and 2 made day 2. So why do you think these two decks kind of underperformed in this event?
Yeah. So Gravy Bones is one that I keep thinking is maybe a little bit like the data doesn't quite do it justice. And I still kind of have this suspicion, but there's only so many times you can have a bad event before, before, maybe the deck is just not good. I think the biggest thing holding Gravy Bones back, though, is the Acilio matchup. That one is really tough. And if we kind of consider those top 6 most converting decks, your Dio matchup is playable, but not great. You're pretty good into Pleiades, I would imagine. Pretty good into Fatigue. You're pretty solid into Vincent. You have a lot of blues. You play small hands. They don't really want to clear allies. You're good into Marionette. And then Victor is like, okay. But there's nothing that you like super want to see. I guess you do want to see Marionette. I think Marionette's your one like truly good matchup, but I think you're mostly like decent to unfavored into the top decks. And that's just like not really ideal. And I think that's sort of why we've been seeing Gravy struggle.
That makes sense. That makes sense. He doesn't really want to see any of the top decks right now. And with the rule change of the clash with the ally attacks, it means that it's not like before where it blanks the trounces, it blanks the test of iron grips. Like these cards can now hit the gravy pretty badly too. So the Victor matchup went from like super favored for the Gravy Bones player to maybe like closer to 50-50 now.
Yeah, I think the Gravy, if they're very strong, probably comes out a little bit ahead, but it's definitely not free like it used to be. So yeah, I think Gravy is just sort of like has a few too many problems and not enough good reasons to play it. And Huntsman, I think is kind of similar. Like going down the list, I don't know. I'm not familiar with all of Huntsman's matchup spread, but the ones that I see as problems are Vincent, from what I hear, is quite poor because you end up banishing blood deck cards as you complete your contracts, and that just gives her more cards to hit you with. Victor is very tough. Remembrancing back Goldmane Estates is just so much deck damage that they usually come out in the fatigue race, and I've seen some Victors, I believe there's a top 8 list playing Peck Perfect, which I think just further amplifies that problem, because if you block Peck Perfect, you mill cards, and it's just so much deck damage, and it's another card you can remembrance back. And then Acilio is like, I think, fine for you. I feel like if the Acilio is really strong, they might be slightly favored, but it's not. Even if you call it 50-50, it's sort of, you have like two really bad matchups or 50-50. And then I don't know what you think about I think Dash is fairly close. And then I don't know what you think about the Marionette matchup. Not sure about that one.
The Marionette matchup is very hard as well, depending on how good the Marionette player is.
Sure.
So yeah, I don't think Arachne doesn't really want to play any of the top, like the 5 decks that you mentioned there, and then the one deck that might be okay is Dashed IO if the Dash opponent, it's really hard for the Dash opponent to beat Huntsman unless they are very careful. So like one mistake from Dash IO can cause the game to kind of crash out, right? So it's like the burden's on the Dash IO player, not the Huntsman player.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think we saw Huntsman kind of crop up as this deck that was preying on what we thought was an aggro format early on. And my kind of theory is that people realized, oh, this is an aggro format. That means fatigue's good. And there's all these other fatigue decks that are actually like pretty good into Huntsman and just sort of do the Huntsman role that we initially saw as it had some top 8s. But maybe do it a little bit better or with a little bit fewer problems into the other decks that have sort of emerged as top decks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Then, is there any other decks from the converted day 2 decks that you want to talk about before we maybe move on to the top 8?
Yeah, I'll mention Syndra as an interesting pick at 50% here. I think that Victor and Vincent are a little tough for Syndra. You can build in a way, if you're D-React heavy, to be pretty close into Marionette, and then you do have a very good Acilio matchup. And Syndra had 3 copies at 50% conversion rate. And I did end up losing to one of these Syndras on day 1, end of day 1. And I believe he was like top 16 or so. So Syndra is a hero that we've seen not quite crack top 8, but have solid conversion, solid win rate, and just seems like a okay meta call if you want a deck that can really prey on Acilio. The kind of like red line Syndra that gets to play Clav and Sarakai gets to play Breaking Points is just quite good in that matchup. So Syndra's an interesting deck. And then Tekla Vossen at 50%. So there was 4 Tekla Vossens in the tournament. There was 2 that made day 2. And I guess transitioning into our next topic, those 2 that made day 2 also made top 8, which is very interesting because I don't think Tekla Vossen was really on anyone's radar before this event.
Yeah, that is very true. So, talking about the top 8, we'll just name up all the heroes. So, we have 3 Arachne Marionettes, 1 Acilio, 1 Prism, 1 Dash.io, and 2 Teklovosens. So, do you know anything about the Teklovosen decks?
Yeah, they're both very fatigue oriented, so they're not boost Teklos like what I wrote my article on. They are not boosting at all. They have a bunch of D-Reacts, a bunch of Evos, and looking to try to get that Evo set up online and then grind out games with Teklo Leveler, the Evo upgrade cards, and Singularity. And I believe they also have some remembrance back the like War Machines or those types of Evo upgrades. So yeah, why are we seeing this? I think it's because we kind of mentioned the fatigue metagame and all the Guardians. Teklo is extremely good into the Guardians. I think Teklo is also one of the better decks at fatiguing Dash.io. There was a cool piece of tech, I believe it's Evo Magneto. There's this gloves that can steal an item, and that was quite an impressive piece of tech, I thought. So yeah, this is Evo Magneto, 1 cost mechanologist equipment arms. They block 2. And it says if you have a base arms equipped, transform it when you play this. So that's pretty normal. And says when this defends, you may destroy a card under it. If you do, gain control of target item with cost 0 or 1 controlled by the attacking hero. And it has temper, so it's temper 2. So potentially, if you play another arms and then play Evo Magneto on top of it, you can steal 2 items from the Dash.io. This could be a Cerebellum processor. This could be a boom grenade. So you can block this on the boom grenade and you don't even have to block at the attack because you steal the boom grenade. So yeah, I thought that was a very cool piece of tech. We also saw this card steal Spirit of Irina from Bolton, which maybe not the biggest metagame consideration, but I did think was pretty funny.
Okay, yeah. The Evo Magneto is a really, really cool card. It did come out in heavy hitters, and we didn't really see this card being played, or we don't really see Teklovossen being played at all. So this was like the first time that this card actually like got showcased, basically. And with how like Teklovossen works and with the number of Evos that this deck now plays, it's like it's really consistent even without boosting.
Yeah. I guess the new Evo beta bases, and they're also playing the new Ghost Protocol Architect. I wasn't high on this in the boost shell because it's just a 0 for 1. But when your whole game plan is getting your Evos online and being defensive, it's a block for 3. And then it has, you don't care that you can play it off Banish if you boosted it this turn. But you do care about the Evo upgrade effect, where when this attacks, you can search your deck for an Evo with cost less than or equal to the number of Evos you have equipped, banish it, and then shuffle. So this can just help you tutor up the other bases that you're missing and deal with that. So yeah, it seems like very strong fatigue shell here. And because you don't need to boost, you get to play a lot of tech cards. So you have like Ripple away for Vinsets. You also get to essentially gain life versus the Vinsets as you are setting up. You get to play Warmongers, again, good against Vinset. You get to play Amulet of Echoes for the Acilio matchup, as well as some of they have the AB1 Evos in there, the full set of Recall, Short Circuit, Speed Slip, and what is this one? Heart Drive, so that you can still get your evil upgrade cards online, and then have access to AB to not die that way. So yeah, it seems like a pretty robust fatigue deck, and this is definitely one that I have not gotten the chance to test, but kind of makes sense given the current metagame and really targets those guardians while maybe having good matchups elsewhere. Also, from what I understand, this deck is a nightmare for huntsmen because you will tend to banish their evos and then they get to play them. They also block super well, and the tanks are just incredible. The 3 for 9 overpower and essentially destroy your arsenal or make you discard a card, and getting to recur those is really nasty.
Yeah, Singularity is a very hard card to beat for any fatigue deck. So
That too.
this has to be just like a great meta call for this tournament, right?
Yeah, I think so. And honestly, I don't know exactly where Tekla will land by the time we get to Yokohama. I think that will be a piece that probably all the teams, all the players will be testing and trying to figure out. But I would expect Tekla's representation to go up a fair bit heading into Yokohama. And if he kind of cracks that top 5 and is like the premier fatigue deck, that wouldn't surprise me. But honestly, I don't know enough about this deck at the moment to tell you. I just think that it was a very, very heads up metagame call and a very interesting deck to see do well.
Yeah. I would want to see what happens after people start adjusting once they know what this deck is doing now, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see how it holds up, but it makes a ton of sense given the other top decks, is what I'll say with it. And seeing 2 in top 8 and seeing some of the games, it's like, yep, I see why this deck was here, and why it did so well.
Okay, then moving on, you want to just move on to maybe the finals matchups that happened, which is Michael Hamilton versus Jacob Clements. Michael Hamilton on Acilio and Jacob Clements on Arachne Marionette, the top 2 decks that we were talking about basically this whole episode so far.
Yeah. So perhaps no surprises, both in terms of the heroes as well as the player. Hamilton and Clements are both 2 of the best players in the world, hands down. Also just have been doing incredibly well lately, so shout out to both of them. Jacob Clements does ultimately end up taking it down on Arachne Marionette. If you haven't watched that game, I would recommend watching it. It is a very tight, very, very close game, and it was a pleasure to watch, and it was really cool to see that finals. I was actually sharing an Airbnb with Clements and Hamilton and Fung and Brody, and it was kind of fun to have the calling finals in our Airbnb and go back and hang out afterwards. So yeah, congrats to both of them, and I guess especially congrats to Jacob. I think this is the first calling win on Marionette. We've seen a lot of top 8s. We've even seen multiple finals appearances, but I believe this is the first calling win. So
yeah, that game was really sick, where I feel like watching from both sides, there's a lot of decisions that they make that I feel like most other players or a lot of other players will kind of miss. So it's definitely a game to study, right? Hamilton has so many decisions that game, and I feel like he made almost all the good ones. And Jacob also had so many decisions that game, and a lot of the decisions Jacob makes kind of end up winning him the game just barely too. So it was a sick game. It's definitely a sick game to watch.
Yeah, and it's a good one to analyze too. It was interesting because we actually did that. We went back and watched it and analyzed it, and I know some of the takeaways was that they both felt like they could have actually even made a few more slightly more optimal decisions. I think for the most part they made very good choices and they got kind of a lot of the big decisions right, but there were a few smaller decision points where maybe not exactly in hindsight, but like reviewing the game with the information provided, there was probably like a slightly more optimal block or slightly more optimal play that could have ended up mattering. But yeah, it was all very fine, a couple 1 or 2 points here or there. But considering how close the matchup was, all those points could matter.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, then let's talk about the CC metagame for Yokohama, what we think are going to be the top decks and what we think people will be bringing to this event. But before that, we did get a ban list update for the CC metagame, and I'm not sure how this ban list will change anything, but 2 cards got unbanned, nothing got banned. We will see Rootbound Carapace, all colors got unbanned, and Spectre of Pain that also got unbanned. So Rootbound looks like a card that Yarrow might be able to use, and Spectre of Pain maybe Vincent? Like, maybe? Like, I'm not sure who Spectre of Pain is for, but
She's the only hero that can legally play it. She's the only Runeblade in the format. So yeah, Vincent could play Scepter of Pain. It's at best a sideboard card. I don't think this is going to hugely impact the list if I had to guess. I think most of the decks in the format have AB1 and can stop it, and the rate on this card is just okay. But maybe this is a useful sideboard card. I could see it. And then yeah, Rootbound for Yarrow. That's a decent upgrade to Yarrow, honestly. Like it helps him get his Fellings online. But I'm not convinced that Yarrow is better than, say, I'm gonna say Victor. I think Victor, to me, Victor is the Guardian that I believe in the most from these, and I think that we see Pleiades and Valda doing pretty well because I think Guardian's pretty well positioned. But I don't want to say there's no reason to play Valda or Pleiades, but it's not super clear to me why I would want to play these two heroes over Victor. We can talk about it as we go through each of the heroes, but yeah, Victor is the Guardian that really stands out to me.
That's fair. I think the one thing that would be interesting with Rootbound and Jarl would be that now Jarl can be a very aggressive deck,
Yeah.
playing like Plow Unders and Felling of the Crowns on like first cycle. And now you're not reliant on playing Elemental Strike first. You can be Rootbounding first, which means a lot more options get available for Jarl being a little bit more aggressively slanted, which might be a good thing. So there might be someone bringing Yarrow and like an aggressively slanted Yarrow that like you think Yarrow's gonna fatigue you, you fat deck a little bit, and then Yarrow's gonna just come out of the gates being like first root bound, felling, plow, 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 and you're just gonna lose to that. So
Yeah, I could see that. And I think Acilio is probably the deck that gets the most hurt by that disruption. Like Stalagmite is also quite nice against Acilio as a disruptive piece, since they don't really want to be pitching very much. So yeah, Jarl might have like the best. It wouldn't surprise me if Jarl has the best Acilio matchup of the Guardians.
yeah, so if you're really trying to target Acilio and you want to play a Guardian, Yarrow might start looking kind of good again, but we'll see. Yeah. So I guess before we move on, there has other ban list announcements with this ban list announcement about cards getting banned for after this PT and right before Omens get released. We'll talk about those bans in a different episode, and we'll just talk about what we think are going to be good for PT Yokohama, and then talk about that next week.
Yeah. So we do want to touch on that, but we want to keep this episode focused and then give that topic maybe a little bit more time and a little bit more of its own spotlight. So we haven't forgotten about this. If you want to hear our thoughts about it, just tune in. I think it should be for next week, but yeah, just tune in and we will cover that.
Do you have any overall metagame thoughts so far? I know we kind of talked about CC a lot already with the calling Memphis discussion, but how do you like this format so far? Like, do you enjoy this metagame?
It is okay. I think that it is one of the most diverse metagames we've seen, which is cool. Kind of have the belief that this metagame is sort of not more diverse than it maybe should be. I think it's just maybe not quite solved or coalesced yet, and there should be fewer decks being played. And I kind of think that broadly we have like Acilio, we have fatigue decks, and then we have these decks that can kind of like target Acilio while holding up to the fatigue decks, which is like Vincent and Dio. And I sort of think that those are broadly the three categories of decks. And there is some nuance in terms of like which ones you can bring, which ones you can play. But I do think that overall kind of covers the categories of decks in the format. So there's like a little bit of a triangle forming in a way. And I think another thing characterizing this format is all of the decks kind of have some bad matchups that they don't really want to see. And I think that's why the metagame is a little bit wide. There's nothing that is like a clear choice, because if you bring Acilio, like, yeah, you're a very good deck, but you're still weak into Dash.io. You really don't want to see that matchup. And then like Vincent is solid into you, so you have some weaknesses there. If you bring Marionette, like you don't love Gravy Bones. So yeah, there is kind of like some different heroes that just have different problems, and it feels a little bit about like choosing which section of the metagame you want to target for Yokohama. And I also think this means that for people going to Yokohama, because it is a little bit wider, maybe lock a deck early. I think having more experience into a wider range of decks is going to be pretty important in this tournament and is probably worth a little bit more than getting the 3% better deck or whatever the gap is between whatever you're picking and whatever you decide the best deck is. It's probably not that big, and you'll probably get a lot more out of just really knowing your game plans and being familiar with all the decks in the format.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that statement a lot, actually. This is a format where I feel like every matchup is played drastically different from each other. And no matter which deck you play, none of these heroes that you can play or bring that are good choices here are easy to play decks, right? They're all quite difficult to navigate the games. Like the Acilio games, when you watch it, are very difficult. The Arachne Marionette games can it looks kind of straightforward, but there's a lot of decisions that Marinette has to make. The Victor deck has a lot of small decisions that will matter for like against other guardians, against the fatigue decks that you need to know the game plans of. So practicing your deck is going to be very important in this for this PT more so than some other metas where you got to just bring Fi and run at your opponent.
Yeah. I can definitely think of some metagames where I'm primarily grinded like 3 matchups. Like prepping for Singapore, I brought Slippy, and it felt like I could spend most of my time on the Slippy Mirror, the Syndra matchup, the Gravy matchup. And there was like a handful of other stuff I wanted to play and make sure I knew. Like I should know Dash IO, I should know Verdance, but like it was really those 3. And I played maybe, I don't know, 50%, 60% of my testing time on those 3 matchups. I don't think this is like that. I think that there's a much wider range of decks to play. And then even as you get down to some of the less represented decks, they still might show up and you still should have plans into them. So there might be more like, I don't know, like 10 decks that you're testing into for this format.
Yeah, I think so. And I think even more than 10 decks, you do need to know what the other decks in the metagame do. Like, if you don't know what like Katsu's cards currently do, you can get blown up. That's what happened to me this weekend is I didn't know what the arm piece did and I just kind of like it got exploded by it. You need to know what Fang's cards do because they're all attack reactions. You kind of need to know what Marlin does because, you're going to see some Marlin probably and they're gonna send some arrow, and if you don't have like a reasonable game plan to it, you might just end up losing because one on hit can be the difference between you winning and losing a game. There's some tough nut players out there that if you haven't played against a tough nut yet, do you know exactly what you're gonna be doing against that deck? Because that could sway your game pretty quickly of if you like make a mistake against that deck too. So there's a lot of decks out there that are reasonable, playable, and if they're practiced into you and you're not practiced into them, then that might be the difference between you winning that match or losing that match.
Yeah, exactly. I think because there's so many decks, there's also more other decks that you can bring that probably have some good matchups somewhere. I think they're like probably less optimal overall if you consider the full matchup spread, but you can target, maybe a handful of those kind of top 5, top 10 decks, and you can bring it, and it's like kind of reasonable.
Yeah, I don't want anyone to bring Dory. Like Dory is a deck that I don't want to play against right now. I'm not familiar enough with all the pen cards that came out, and oh my god, I feel like every time I play against Dory right now, I just like blow up for no reason. Like they play a Blunton, and you're just like, oh my god, I forgot this card. They play the new 0 for 5, and I'm like, oh my god, there's a +5 for 0 right now.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's kind of give our thoughts on the top decks in the format. So Cilio, Marionette, I think we kind of talked about these as potentially the top 2, but also in this top decks category, we have Victor has been very impressive. I don't think he had any copies in top 8 in this tournament. No, he didn't, but he has in the last few, and I think he still had around a 56% win rate on the weekend, which is very impressive. So yeah, Victor is sort of the guardian that I believe in. You do have a bit of a weakness into Acilio. Is playable, but I think you're unfavored there. But you're very good into a lot of the other fatigue decks with the Visit the Goldmane Estate endgame. You're very solid into the aggro decks like Dash.io because of your clashes. And yeah, Victor just seems pretty well rounded to me. Do you agree on the Victor?
Yeah, Victor is the most winning deck in ProQuest wins this week, right after the Verdance ban. So it lost one of its worst matchup of Verdance. So now that it lost its worst matchup, like all of its other matchup was so fair. Winning 17 events, 20% of the events this week is pretty impressive. Just followed up by Arachne Marionette, which is also one of the top decks we've been talking about.
Yeah. So yeah, I think Victor is definitely one to keep its eye on. And I'm really curious. I know that Valda has like a 60% win rate on Talishar or something like this. Not super clear to me why you would play Valda over Victor though. And we kind of see this in the PQ wins. Valda had two PQ wins. Victor had 17. Pretty big difference. And yeah, I mean, like Valda's a little better into KO. Sorry, she was better into KO when KO was in the format, and she's a little better into Acilio. I think because you get some of the dominate, you get some of the like free seismic surges from them. They draw a fair number of cards. I believe on Talishar this is favored, but interestingly, Valda went 3 and 6 into Acilio on the tournament. And when I have played this matchup, it has not felt that scary as Acilio. So I kind of suspect that the stronger Acilios are actually not unfavored into Valda. And I might almost be more afraid of Victor because Test of Iron Grip is kind of spooky. They draw Test at the right time and it can be very backbreaking. So yeah, I'm not super sold on Valda. She had okay numbers at the tournament. She has one of the more represented decks. She converted at 19%, so slightly below average. She had a 50% win rate. She seems fine, but I don't really understand why Valda over Victor.
Yeah, no, I very, very little I can say about Valda as well. I've heard people being really high on Valda, kind of no matter where I go. But
Mhm.
I also don't really understand why I would want to give up Test of Iron Grip for Valda's hero text, kind of is where I'm at. Where I feel like a lot of the games where Victor loses is because they block with a Test of Iron Grip and they lose 2 clashes in a row with their redraw, right? And it's just like, yeah, like that's how Victor loses. But most of the time, Victor wins those clashes and just smashes these aggro deck. It smashes like all the fatigue matchups too. They want an Arsenal card and get Test of Iron Grip for no reason. You're just like, what happened? Like my sync billow disappeared.
Yeah, yeah. I guess the thing I'll say is that I think Valda is good into Victor. I've heard this from a number of people. It shows up in the calling data, it shows up on the February data, and the theory sort of makes sense. Basically, Valda has lots of access to dominate and big attacks, and you can play the Guardian Crush cards that have on hits against Guardians. So if you're just playing a bunch of those, you just dominate these big Guardian on hit attacks against Victor. And he draws multiple block cards. He can only block with one of them. He kind of gets stuck with them. So I guess like that is maybe like one of the redeeming qualities of Alda. You are good in the Guardian mirror. But honestly, overall, I would rather just take Victor and have the better overall spread rather than just be like, I'm a little better in the mirror and kind of, I don't want to say you're worse everywhere else. I think that's reductive. I'm not super familiar with this deck, but yeah, just overall, personally, if I was bringing a Guardian, it would be Victor. And it's not particularly close.
Yeah, I agree with you on there. The one thing that's an actual problem for Valda is the card acquisition. Valda cards are not cheap, and Valda cards are kind of hard to get. Like no matter where you are, like the Mastery Pack Guardian cards are just slightly harder to find. So
Mm-hmm.
finding the Fable that Valda needs to play, like the Shield that Valda gets to play, is also unique to the Mastery Pack Guardian. All her M's are in Mastery Pack Guardian. So like you'll need to find someone who's bought Mastery Pack Guardian to be able to even play Valda. And I know like for the Pro Quest, there were some people that I know that wanted to play Valda but couldn't because we couldn't get the Mastery Pack Guardian cards.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Victor seems like the easier deck to acquire as well. Okay, moving on from Victor, I'm going to say Dash.io. Dash.io had a top 4 appearance here. Top 4
Yeah,
appearance.
lost to Jacob Clements.
Yeah, yeah. And Dash.io has 1-2 callings this season, and just consistently performs well. Dash.io is good into Acilio. I think it's probably one of Acilio's worst matchups. and you kind of have game into all of these fatigue decks. My impression is that the not system reset, the BIOS update, Tekla Pounder, Plasma Mainline, Prismatic Lens style decks that do not play maximum velocity are perhaps a little bit. I've been hearing from Dash.ios that they're a little bit more reliable, let's say, into the fatigue deck. So people have been favoring that build, and the deck that made top 8 in calling Memphis was that style deck. We also saw Sam Sutherland do well on that deck in Brisbane, I believe. So that variant of Dash.io seems maybe a little bit better equipped to deal with all the fatigue decks. And I would say that if you're really confident in Dash and you're confident in all of these fatigue matchups, Dash.io is pretty good. You're also pretty solid into Marionette, I think. So yeah, Dash.io just good hero. Maybe a runner up for me for Pro Tour Yokohama. I've played a lot of Dio. I haven't played the BIOS update deck. I should do that. That's probably something on my list to do. I find the fatigue matchups really exhausting, so I don't know if I want to bring this into a fatigue metagame. I think that the stamina throughout the tournament may get to me, whereas I quite like playing Acilio into the slower decks. I find that more enjoyable for me, so that's kind of why I'm leaning Acilio. But I think Dio's like super good pick, and your Acilio matchup is very good. Even with Wobble helps it a little bit. But man, Dash.io just does so much damage and also has disruption, which is exactly what you want against Acilio.
That's fair. That's super fair. Yeah, Dash.io is a deck I don't want to face or I don't want to see across from me. Like, the caliber of players that are going to be at PT Yokohama bringing Dash.io is going to be very high. And playing against a strong Dio player is a nightmare no matter what deck you bring.
Yeah, it's just scary. You can have a technically favored matchup, but Dash.io, the ceiling on that deck is just so high that she is never, I don't want to say she's never out of the game, but when you sit down, you never feel like she's out of the game. There is a point in the matchup where you go, okay, this is probably out of her reach. Yeah, man, she can have some monster turns, and she's a very scary deck to play against. I'm also just always stressed when I'm playing against Dash.io.
Okay, then let's move on. So another top deck to talk about will be Vincent. So Vincent has had an explosion of popularity in calling Montreal, with
June doing really well on the deck. She made it all the way to finals, and I believe was top seed in Swiss. Yeah, we've seen her also make top 8 the following week in Toulouse in the hands of Shamir. And we've seen her fairly highly represented at a lot of these recent events. She picked up 7 PQ wins. Yeah, the Deep Recesses of Evil and the new Grimoire are huge upgrades for Vincent. Just gives her a lot more consistency as well as a lot more ceiling. She gets to play Disruption for Acilio, and I think that matchup seems pretty close. And then you have a lot of tools into Fatigue where you can set up these really big turns and kind of go over the top. We kind of mentioned like Huntsman having trouble into her. I'm not sure about the Guardian matchups. Those have seemed tough. I have watched some, like I watched Mara's game against some Guardians on stream, and it seemed kind of grim. And I've seen a lot of games go like this, but I've also heard some Vincents say that they feel comfortable into Guardians. So Vincent's a little bit of a question mark for me. This is also one that I think maybe needs exploration. Doesn't personally interest me because I hate when I don't draw the blood deck cards. It makes me so sad. I also hate when I get stuck on blood deck cards and I don't draw the go again. Both of those things really do not feel good. So I don't personally want to play Vincent, but I think that if you are comfortable into the fatigue decks and the Guardians, Vincent seems like a really good pick.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Vincent's one of those decks where I feel like the deck having the downside of having to, like, you must banish a card from your hand is like a big downside, and that's like the one thing that prevents me from wanting to play Vincent. I think it has a game into everything. It's not actually like stone cold dead into any deck in this format right now. Just being able to like play call like more than once in one turn is kind of ridiculous, and it definitely does something that feels the most unfair in this format is when someone plays call and then they just play call again, and you're just like, well, I can't block. They're presenting 33 points of damage to me at this turn. I go to 4, like once I'm at 4, I'm just dead. Like there's like nothing I can do. There's no way I can prevent all the rune chance and all the physical damage that Vincent gets to swing. And typically this deck is like pretty good at having off turn, on turn. So that itself is already good into the Guardians, right?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, she has a lot of tools, and I think when the deck is humming, it's really powerful. It's just a matter of like if you can get it consistent enough, and if you can. I think the slow matchups are the hard ones, as been said. So yeah, it's interesting. Probably not a hero for me, but I think potentially a top pick. We will see. I think that she did not do as well at this tournament. Brody did finish top 16 on her, and she had an okay conversion rate, 26%, but like not, she just didn't seem super remarkable either. Her win rate was right around 50%. So yeah, we'll see how she goes. This is maybe the one that I could see being a solid pick or a top tier deck. She's kind of right on the border for me, but the Vincent players seem to think that she's really good, so I'll give her the nod and say that she's a top deck.
I think the biggest difference between what happened in like maybe Montreal and this calling would be the resurgence of Ripple Away being played more often compared to maybe 2-3 weeks ago when Vincent was less popular. More people are bringing Ripple Away, so then Vincent doesn't have the omega big pop off turns now, right?
Yeah, and like Teklo can also play Warmonger, so there definitely is hate for this deck that exists if you want to play it. That makes it more challenging to navigate the games. I would say.
Then let's move on to the solid picks next. So top of this list that I have is Huntsman. Definitely not as powerful as maybe in the first couple of weeks when Pablo really highlighted the power of the new pen cards that came out. And I think we already talked about this enough, but the metagame, how it shook down, is not favorable for Huntsman anymore. It's still good into all the aggro decks. It's still good into all of these mid-rangey decks. But when they have a plan into you and when the like Acilio has, good practice into you, Huntsman is not looking the greatest anymore. Definitely below all five decks that we talked about beforehand.
Yeah, I think he has some problems and maybe not powerful in the abstract, but often a good litmus test for decks is like sort of like, well, why am I playing this deck? And like, like we kind of talked about Acilio, Vincent being able to beat anything. Marionette's similar. I think all those decks are super powerful and explosive. Victor gets to prey on the aggro decks and has a good fatigue end game, so beats up a lot of decks in fatigue. Dio can kind of go over the top of anyone. Huntsman, it's a little harder to find a narrative of exactly like this is why I'm bringing it to the tournament, and I think that for me that's sort of like the indicator that Huntsman is solid, but yeah, definitely a step down.
Yeah, and Huntsman right now is the one that needs to be working to beat all the decks on the format, and that's kind of not where you want to be when you bring when you're bringing one of the decks. But I think that being said, the new equipment from Penn, the Graven Arms, that has given Huntsman so much game and so much block value that this deck now blocks just like better than Warriors do through what's the like piece called? Valiant
Valiant
Dynamo.
Dynamos.
Yeah, so like if you're going to be doing the warrior thing of like trying to like keep blocking with the Valiant Dynamos, I feel like Huntsman does that better now of like blocking with the Graven Arm piece. So yeah, it's sort of like the slot that this hero ended up taking is I feel like is kind of replacing what Kasai and what these warriors were previously doing.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And I think Huntsman has a lot of tools to target different matchups, so you can kind of shore up some of these matchups. But the issue that I've been seeing is that the cards you need for different matchups all change so much. Like Acilio, you would love to have AB3 and amulets, but those don't help you anywhere else. And then against Victor, maybe you want like gravekeepings and more fatigue oriented cards, but those don't help you against Acilio. And so you're just kind of like pulled in a bunch of different directions, and you can solve some of your problems, but it's very hard to solve all of them at the same time. I think if Huntsman had like 100 cards and like let's say you could still only present like, I don't know, 70 into the fatigue matchups or whatever, it would be a lot stronger deck, but it just sort of has like a few too many problems that need different cards is what it feels like.
Yeah, but I still think this deck will. I feel like this deck will still be represented at this tournament, though.
I think so, and I think it will still do solidly. I think it is, as the category says, a solid pick. Next on the list is Teklovasen. Teklovasen could very well be a top deck. We've talked quite a bit about Teklo, and we also mentioned we don't know the most about the deck, but seems good into Vincent because you can set up the armor and just block super well, and you get to play Warmongers and Ripple away. Seems good into the other Guardians, and solid into Dio from a fatigue perspective. I think Acilio is bad for you. I just can't imagine that matchup being good. Maybe if you can get your Evos online really quickly and start disrupting them, that would be the best thing you can do. But I'm pretty sure the Acilio matchup is bad. And I'm not sure about the Marionette matchup. I watched Jacob play against a Teklo, and it seemed kind of like a slaughter. So I'm not sure. Yeah, Acilio was 4-0 into Teklo at the event. So yeah, maybe a bit of a meta call where you struggle a bit into those top two decks, but I think you are very good into basically everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think we talked about Teklo already earlier in the episode. So moving on will be Gravy Bones. We already talked about Gravy a little bit, but it definitely seems like a deck that we keep on saying this. It seems like a deck that it should be doing better, but it never does.
Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe it's just not good. I know a lot of the Gravy players don't want to play the deck, and I don't know if that's part of why it's doing worse or if it's also just bad because the Gravy players don't want to play the deck, and that's because it's not good. The bad Acilio matchup is tough. You are technically good into a lot of these fatiguey decks. It's possible that Teklo just occupies a similar spot but does it better. Weirdly, like I wouldn't think of Teklo and Gravy Bones as similar, but for this tournament, they actually might be.
Okay. Yeah, okay. That's pretty fair. That's very fair. They're kind of focusing on beating the same kind of decks too, right?
Yeah. That's sort of why I say they're similar. Like in terms of the meta game they're targeting, it feels kind of similar-ish.
Okay. I'll be interested to see where Gravy lands at PT Yokohama, honestly.
Yeah, me too. I'm curious if we'll see some of the longtime devotees. Jimmy Nero Demare comes to mind. Justin Koo comes to mind. There's a few players, Evan Herndon. There's a few players that have consistently been playing Gravy Bones at big events and doing well. And I am curious to see if that will continue and how they'll do, because I think I believe that Gravy is better than we think that he is, but maybe that's just because he's been good for so long. I don't know. I could be wrong about it, but I think Gravy might have an angle here.
Okay, fair enough. Next on this list, we had Valda. We already talked about this list. We can just move on.
Yeah, maybe we should also talk about Pleiades as a fatigue guardian that showed up in top 8 of this event. Did it? No, it didn't.
It did not.
She showed up in day 2, but did not make top 8. Had some decent numbers. I also don't know why you're playing Pleiades over Victor is kind of my thing. I have a lot of similar things to say about Pleiades as I do about Valda, where I need a sales pitch on this card or on this deck. And I know that there are some people really pushing this deck and doing content and very excited about this deck, but like, what is it in the metagame that exists that makes you go, yeah, Pleiades is the deck? And I'm not sure. I guess you got to play like Warmongers and Ripple into Vincent, so maybe you're better into Vincent.
Well, in untimed matches, Pleiades is by far the deck that gets to fatigue every other fatigue deck, right? Like, it has the most amount of cards. It just has so many numbers in that deck that there's no way you can fatigue a Pleiades.
Is that true?
I think so. Like, Victor can't fatigue Pleiades. I don't think Valda can fatigue Pleiades, but Valda might be able to dominate over Pleiades.
She's negative in like it's small sample size, but she went 1-2 into Valda and 2-6 into Victor. Like, if Victor has double remembrance and is playing like Peck Perfects and Visit the Gold Main Estates, what is your game plan? What are you doing?
I don't think the Victor's fatiguing Pleiades though. They're trying to kill the Pleiades.
Yeah,
like
sure.
The gold, like they're trying to play visits into visits, so then they can swing a gold sun for like 20, and that's how they're winning the games instead of like being the fatigue deck, right? Like they're not trying to fatigue Pleiades. Like that's just like impossible to do. There's like so many cards in Pleiades that they can't Like, I don't think anyone can fatigue a Pleiades, is what I'm trying to say.
Sure. Yeah, it's hard to run them out of cards, but I think that there's just decks that have like bigger end games. I don't know. Yeah, this one's a big question mark for me. I'm skeptical of Pleiades, but I know some people are very enthusiastic about the deck, and she did fine.
Yeah, no, she did pretty good. Like 4 copies, 36% day 2 conversion at Memphis. You know, it didn't top 8, but we did see it near the top tables through the whole tournament, and just like it's a fine deck. Like it wins games.
Yeah. It's just again like I feel like there's just better choices, but she's okay. I again, like, what's the sales pitch? It's sort of similar to like Huntsman. Like, well, why are you bringing this deck to this tournament? And I don't quite see it, but maybe that's just me.
You know what the biggest sales pitch for both Huntsman and Pleiades is that you like the deck. Like, that's why you're bringing this deck, is because you like the deck.
Sure. That's fair. Yeah. I do think deck like preference does matter, but I tend to mostly select decks off of like power level and meta position. So for me, it's sort of like I don't get it. But yeah, I guess if you really like the deck, she's good enough.
Yeah, she's good enough. So right underneath Pleiades, we have Prism. So she survived the LL leaderboard. She's probably going away in the next season, but currently she is still legal and she is like fine. She has a lot of tools and a lot of ways to win a lot of different games, but you really need to be like a master at the deck to even have a good chance at everyone. But let's say you are a master at Prism. Why are we still bringing Prism? Like, what do you think Prism's actually like well positioned in this metagame?
The Prism sickos that I talked to in Memphis did not seem to think that she's like that well positioned. I played against Andrew Cook and I was like, oh, Prism, right? And he's like, nah, I'm on Acilio. I just can't find a reason to do it. So I'm not sure about Prism. She did make top 8 though, so it clearly has something there. I think you can target Acilio and be good into Acilio. Your default Herald's game plan is not enough. But if you start playing cards like Weakest Link, cards like CNC, where you can go Herald into Disruption, it can start to get scary pretty quickly for Acilio. So I think that there are tools there. I don't think you really want to see the Guardians. They have a bunch of poppers, so many poppers, and they have Clash of Bravado now, which I think has really swung that matchup where they can just block and pop an aura, and that's pretty painful. And from what I understand, Vincent is a pretty miserable matchup as well. Just tons of poppers, lots of damage. She can pay life, and then damage can't be prevented, which blows up all your Spectral Shields and Angels. Yeah, so I think Prism has some pretty big problems. She's a powerful deck. She's always a powerful deck. She does a very powerful thing. I don't really think this is the metagame for her, but I also feel like she's the kind of deck where the true Prism devotees find a way, and we saw that in Memphis. Somebody did make top 8 with her. So I don't think this is the deck that I would want to bring. I think she's a deck that will show up, and if she spikes a top 8, I wouldn't be shocked, is what I would say.
I think the best thing for me to say would be like, I feel like you need to at least play a couple of games into Prism if you're gonna go to Yokohama.
Yeah.
And be like at least have like some kind of like image of what you're trying to do against this Prism. But I don't know if I would recommend anyone to bring Prism to this event.
Yeah, I would never recommend it. If you're bringing Prism and you believe it's a good choice for you, that would be the reason to bring Prism. But I don't think I would ever say, yeah, you should pick up Prism for this event. No, there's no reason to pick up Prism for this event. But if you love Prism and you feel like you've got your matchups figured out enough, power to you.
Fair enough. The last deck on this list that you added is Syndra. We already talked a little bit about Syndra, about how like reasonable this deck is. It has a good game plan into like a lot of the decks right now. Do you think people will bring Syndra to this event? Because I kind of feel like this deck's probably going to be very like not represented for PT Yokohama. At least that's my take right now.
I kind of feel like there's going to be a handful of players that are going to bring Syndra and do kind of okay on her. The biggest thing I have been considering Syndra on and off. The biggest thing that scares me is that I think all the Guardians should be playing Victor. And if all the Guardians start playing Victor, I really don't want to play Syndra. But like so far, all the Guardians haven't been playing Victor, so maybe she's kind of reasonable. But I don't know if I really want to take that gamble. So I don't know. I think Syndra's okay. Your Vincent matchup is also a little bit tough, but you are okay into a lot of the other stuff. So yeah, Syndra is just sort of interesting. Yeah, biggest reason to take her, good Acilio matchup. Dash IO probably does Syndra's job better, but she's solid. She's still good. Mask of Momentum, Flick Knives, really, really solid. Very consistent deck. I think a reasonable pick for this tournament, but probably not the strongest.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I feel like if your like goal is to like go like 6-4 with a deck, Syndra might be like the deck that you want to bring, so you do like very consistent with it. But like, I feel like a lot of decks just can like smash you, or like if you know Acilio high rolls you, like you're never winning. I don't know. I feel like there's more problems for Syndra than there are like benefits.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, that's pretty much our thoughts on the CC metagame. For me, it really is the top 5 decks: Acilio, Marionette, Victor, Vincent, Dio, and maybe Teklo as a meta call. And then I think all of these other solid picks are ones that I think you're making as a comfort pick, or because you like the deck and you have some preferences. I think that in terms of pure maximum win rate, decision making, and best meta spread, I believe in those top 5, and maybe Teklo the most.
Okay, fair enough. Do you have like a, let's say, a suggestion, or like if you were to convince somebody that's going to PT Yokohama, they're asking you, what deck should I play, or what deck should I pick up to learn for this event? What would you recommend somebody?
One of the top 5 decks, and if you are picking it up, I would lock it now. I would have locked it already, honestly. I think maybe Victor, if you're locking a deck at this point. I think that, to me, Marionette has a lot of nuance. I think Acilio and Vincent are probably the 2 hardest decks in the format right now, and I think Dio is also right behind them. So Victor, I think, is the most straightforward to pick up. And if you are still searching for a deck and still kind of cycling through decks and you don't have experience on any of these decks, I'd probably play Victor. Unless you feel really strongly. If you really want to play one of these other decks, pick it, lock it, and don't change. I don't think you have time to like play a week on Acilio and play a week on Vincent and then lock one of them. It's too late for that. These decks are a little too complicated to do that and be successful, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Like Acilio is so hard. I feel like you need to play this deck for like solidly 2 weeks for you to have a good chance of like piloting Acilio perfectly, or not perfectly, but like close to what you need to do to win games at the PT.
Yeah, I think ideally a lot of these decks you would have already decided on like 1, 2, 3 weeks ago, and if you're starting now, it's tough. Victor is the one that I think you could pretty reasonably pick up and get to a spot where, yes, I'm solid for Yokohama. I think that would be no problem. But the other 4, it's tough. Marionette looks easy. I think the dagger management is actually really hard, and Codex of Inertia is a hard card to play. There's a lot of percentage type stuff around the transformations and the flips, and the difference between a pretty good Marionette and a very good one is so big. It's like hard to understate. So yeah, Marionette I think often looks like an easy deck, and a lot of people pick it up and feel like they have success, but there is so much nuance there. So yeah, I think all of these decks are just really, really tough. And yeah, maybe consider playing Victor if you're picking up a deck at this point.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I would suggest the same thing. Like, play Victor. It's, if you have like maybe like 30 games on Victor, that should be enough to figure it out. Just make sure you play into the mirror, you play into like all the decks to have a good grasp on when you're supposed to test of Iron Grip people. And that's kind of be the kind of like your most difficult decision, is to when do you test of Iron Grip and when do you not need to test of Iron Grip, because that's probably going to be a big factor on winning and losing games, is like when do you IP to keep a test of Iron Grip. I feel like a lot of the games can be decided by that. So I think that's the biggest thing for Victor.
Yeah, and know your like fatiguey long game win cons where you set up the Golden Suns for 20 type plays, those massive turns, or I remember hearing some victors playing last ditch efforts and like cracking gold, drawing a bunch of cards and giant last ditch effort into giant last ditch effort and things like this. So just you probably want to play those and make sure that you're comfortable, but you have a lot of strong tools and the deck is relatively straightforward.
Okay, then let's move on. Let's quickly talk about the Sage metagame. I feel like there's a little bit less to talk about here. Um, the biggest thing, I guess, to start would be the BNR announcements for this season. They kind of came out and said that they didn't say it specifically, but they basically said that KO is kind of a problem, but because that it is a precon and we're not going to hit any cards from the precon, there's not really that many cards we can hit from KO that would impactfully change this KO deck essentially from what it is right now. Because that's what this deck is right now, right? Like, it's basically just a precon plus maybe assault and battery, which is just a blue 3 block like 85% of the time.
Yeah, there's like definitely a few more cards in that, but I think that like all of the most powerful cards in KO that you could maybe consider hitting are in the precon. So you have like Bear Fangs, Wild Ride, Savage Feast, Beaten Trackers, Buck Wild. I think like these essentially Go Again or Go Again in conjunction with Beaten Trackers are the cards that he probably doesn't need all of them. But yeah, they said that they want to make sure that the precons are playable out of the box for at least one season. And from a business perspective, that kind of makes sense. From a PT player perspective, that kind of sucks. But it is what it is. They did say that in the future, they will, after the one season is up, they will happily adjust the format and ban cards. So it's not like if a card's in a precon, it's never touchable, but for at least one season is the promise that they've kind of made.
Yeah. And there is no way this deck will survive the community vote, right?
Yeah, I think KO is, as far as I can think of, the most singular a format has ever been in Flesh and Blood in terms of just like we just see like 45% of the tournament being KO. And I can't think of another time we've seen this. Like we see like a deck being at like 30% and we're like, oh my goodness, this deck's out of control. But KO's at like 45% and still just has like a 55% win rate. It's crazy. It's crazy. Like KO is the top deck, the deck to beat. That doesn't mean nothing beats KO. But I think like kind of objectively, KO has the strongest matchup spread. And you can either choose to play KO, you can choose to play a deck that beats KO, and if you really want to, you can play a deck that beats the deck that beats KO. I don't know if I would be in the third category, because if half the tournament is KO and then people are going to play some other random stuff, like how much of the meta is actually the deck that beats KO? Like probably not that much. And so I don't really know why you're bringing those decks, but I do think those are kind of the three main categories of decks that I would consider playing for Sage at Yokohama.
Do you know the problem with the decks that beat KO?
Mm.
It doesn't always beat the KO.
Yeah. Some of them have good KO matchups, but they're like KO can just still perfect you, and then like if KO just draws perfect, they just run you over.
Yeah, like they win the die roll. Oh wow, they present 16, then 18, and you're just like, well, I'm playing these decks that's supposed to beat this KO deck, but like I'm still gonna lose because I drew my 2 blocks. Great. Like, yeah, it doesn't matter what deck you bring, no matter what. Like, you could be favored. You could be like a 60-40 or like even a little bit better, like 65-35 into a KO, but you're still gonna lose 1/3 of the time into the KOs. And I don't think there's a deck that like KO is like so unfavored into. And it's just so favored into like kind of everything else and has no bad matchup. This is a one deck format, right, for this PT?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, I think it has some bad matchups, but yeah, KO is the top deck, I think, and there's no debate about that. Let's talk about the decks that do beat KO. I kind of only believe in one of these decks, to be honest, but we'll talk about all of them. That deck would be Oldhim. We've seen Fatigue Oldhims crop up. I mean, Fatigue Oldhim's been around, but basically, you have access to Rootbound Carapace if you want it. You have access to Sit as a 5 block against Brute cards, which you should be playing if you're playing against KO. And yeah, you have a solid fatigue plan into KO, and I do think you are favored. Like decently so. I think you have like a real edge in that matchup. You have problems elsewhere in the metagame, but you're still a pretty strong deck. So I like Oldhim a fair bit, and I think that for me, I'm probably either on KO or Oldhim.
I guess another hero to talk about will be Volda, though, right? Like, Volda is definitely better than Oldhim into KO.
Yeah, but Valda's bad into Oldhim. I kind of feel like Valda's like good into KO, and then like I don't really want to play the other decks if I'm playing Valda.
Yeah, like, if you bring Volda, the 6 rounds of Sage that you play at the PT Yokohama better be KO, 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 and KO, KO, KO. And if you
You
do
could play
that,
you could play against 5 KOs and it'd probably be okay too.
yeah, you go 5-1. That's great. That'd be perfect, honestly. I would love that.
Yeah. I don't know if Valda is enough. I need to test Sage more. I have not that much motivation to test Sage. I feel like all the top players I talk to at Memphis are like not excited about Sage for Yokohama, which is tough. But we do need to play the format and we do need to test it, and we will test it. It's just not exciting. Yeah. So my question really is, how much better into KO is Valda? Probably worth exploring. Can you shore up some of your other matchups? But right now, Valda seems kind of sad, and Valda Oldhim does not seem like a fun matchup for Valda. It's sort of just, yeah, Earth
Mhm.
React, D reacts. You played this like on turn, off turn with Dominate, and you're like, Dominate's great at breaking through. And then you realize they have like Staunch, Unmovable, Lay Low. They just have enough D reacts that like you take your off turn, they Arsenal their D react. You take your big Dominate turn, they play the D react from Arsenal and block an Earth react, and then they just do it again. And you'll leak some damage, but it seems hard.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is the D react from Oldhim, right? Like, Dominate
Mhm.
means that they can only use 1 card, but if they have an Earth card, they can go. Even let's say they don't have the D react, they go block for 3 Earth react, take 4 or something. It's like that's already like, like, it's supposed to leak 6 or 7, it only leaks 5. That's a big difference.
Yeah, so that's Valda. There's also a Dash IE. We saw Dash IE win a showdown. I think it was in Brisbane. This deck is technically favored into KO. I don't think it is as favored as Oldhim and Valda, and I think you are actually 0% into the Guardians. So personally, I don't really see a reason to bring this deck. I don't think you are good enough into KO to justify it, and I don't think the rest of your matchup spread is anything special. So I don't really believe in Dash, but it is worth mentioning because it was in a showdown. And I don't mean to be dismissive. Congratulations to, I should know the name, I should have brought it up, but congratulations to the winner of the showdown in Brisbane. It was cool to see another deck succeed, and it is entirely possible I'm underrating Dash, but with a bunch of Guardians cropping up as things targeting KO, I don't know if I want to bring this deck. And I think that your KO matchup is like fine, but if I wanted to beat KO, I'd just play one of the Guardians, is how I feel.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, not much to say about this Dash deck. Then, what are the decks that beat the decks that beat KO? So, what beats Oldhim Valda? What beats Dash? Like, what are the other choices that maybe you could bring?
Yeah, I guess these are mostly considering the Guardians because don't really consider Dash so much. I think the best of the bunch is Ira. We've seen Ira do pretty well. She was in the showdown in Memphis. I'm just going to bring it up right now.
Yeah, there was an Ira at 2nd place, and there's also an Ira that came 3rd place or 3rd, 4th place. So there's 2
Yeah.
Iras in top 4, and 1 more Ira in top 8 actually.
Yeah, 3 in top 8. And she had a pretty good win rate overall. She's very good into Oldhim and pretty good into the rest of the field, and unfavored into KO is sort of my understanding of Ira right now. And that's an okay place to be.
We say Ira is unfavored in KO, but like it has a really reasonable game as long as it gets to go 2nd, right? Like as long as it's basically like like the aggro mirror where if Ira gets to go 2nd and then doesn't brick, like they should still win the game.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a typical aggro mirror still. So like it's not like you're losing too much into KO. Like you are unfavored. KO is like the better aggro deck, but it doesn't mean that you're like actually that much of a dog either. So Ira is a pretty reasonable pick for this event.
Yeah, I agree. I think Ira is maybe the third deck I could play. KO Oldham and Ira seem like the three kind of real decks in this format, and there's like a bit of a triangle forming. And then I think a lot of it hinges on how close do you think your Ira matchup is into KO. If you think it's close enough, maybe that is, you think more people are going to be targeting KO. You think that your KO matchup is close enough, then Ira seems like a great pick. If you think most of the field is going to be on KO, I can see a justification for Oldham. And if you feel like as KO you can be good enough into the Guardians, or you don't think that enough people are going to be targeting KO, then KO really good. Hard to go wrong with KO. I kind of think that there's going to be more Guardian at the PT than we have seen. This is like a really old data point, but I just remember at the last time we saw a format kind of like this was Blitz at Worlds, and Icelander was just the best deck. It wasn't particularly close. Definitely Icelander was the best deck. And the deck that beat Icelander pretty handily was Prism, and the problem with Prism is you were bad into basically all the other like decks that were kind of decks in the format. Like you didn't like Chain, you didn't like Rhinar, you had a bunch of problems. And quite a few people brought Prism because they just said the top tables are going to be on KO. I'm going to sack all my other matchups, and I'm going to be good into. Oh, sorry, all the top players on the top tables are going to be on Icelander. I'm going to sack all my other matchups, and I'm going to just bring Prism and beat up Icelanders, and that's my entire game plan. And quite a few people did this, and I think quite a few of them did quite well. And I sort of suspect that we might see that at the PT. So that's sort of my prediction, is that I think that this Guardian chunk will be not more represented than KO, but a very real part of the representation of the tournament.
That's fair. That's fair. I guess before we talk about what I wanted to talk about, let's just quickly go through the other decks that maybe people can bring. Next to Ira will be Fi. So Fi is just like a reasonably good aggro deck, definitely below KO in consistency, but as long as Fi doesn't draw 2 blues, 3 blue hands, Fi is just really explosive and good enough to kind of beat everything in the format.
Yeah, and you're decent into like the Guardians and stuff like that. I think it's okay. To me, Fi is largely worse Ira, but still pretty good.
And then the wizard of the format would be Kano. If people don't bring AB, then Kano will be good, but there's kind of no way people don't bring AB, right? Like, just in case.
Yeah, I think Kano seemed kind of okay into KO early on when they were on like AB1, but if KO is packing AB2, Spell Void 3, and Beaten Trackers, I think it's probably the optimal setup for KO. That matchup is really grim. You are good into the Guardians, I believe. I've heard from Kanos, and my brief experience playing Kano is that you can be pretty good into the slow decks like Oldham and stuff like this. You have a lot of inevitability there. So that's pretty good for you, and you are, I think, okay into like Fi Ira. It's flippy, but it's fine. But yeah, you're really bad into KO. So I personally wouldn't really want to bring Kano. You could try. Maybe if you're okay with the KO matchup. I've heard some Kanos say that they think they're okay, but my experience is you just sit there and you're like, I just need them to not have go again one turn, and they just have go again every turn.
Yeah, the existence of Beaten Tracker essentially says that they always have go again.
Yeah, it's so hard for them to brick. Like, can it happen? Yeah. Are you actually 0%? No, but the matchup is so hard. I've played a bunch of this, and I've just gotten smashed. I've played a bunch against a bunch of different KOs, and I cannot win it. So I'm definitely not bringing Kano, is what I can say.
Fair enough. Then we'll quickly let's talk about Enigma first. Enigma is the deck that wants to hunt Olam and Valda, right? Like, I don't know if anyone can bring a Guardian that can beat Enigma that also beats the KO. Like,
yeah,
I have put together an Oldham list for Sage that can beat Enigma, but that list will never beat a KO.
Yeah, exactly. And the problem with Enigma is you're bad into KO and you're bad into the ninjas. So I don't think I can recommend this deck, but I will mention it because it beats one of the corners of the triangle. It's just that I don't think it's the biggest corner. So I think bringing this deck is like a little bit crazy, but maybe you find the sauce. Maybe you crack the KO matchup and make it like 40%, and then you have the best deck.
Yeah, yeah. If you can crack the KO matchup, I want to know what it is. Please let me know. But yeah, I would right now I think I'm on Oldham and I have completely given up on this Enigma matchup. So yeah, if you decide to bring Enigma for whatever reason, you pair into me, you get the free win. Like I'm 0% into you. Like it's no way. There's no way. And then the last deck that beats the Guardians pretty handily will be the stack decks, and Florian is probably the best one right now. It's slightly better than Viscerai in my opinion.
You just sit there and you block and you make a million rune chants, and the Guardians that have tuned their decks to be KOs and be full of block cards are not very good at beating this strategy. In fact, I would say that they're pretty terrible at beating this strategy. You don't have very many outs at all. Is Florian good enough into KO? No, not really. Your plan is too slow, too inefficient, and you will just get run over. Has been my understanding of that matchup from mostly hearsay. I haven't actually been testing that much Sage, but we also haven't seen Florian exactly performing either. So inclined to believe that.
It top 8 in Memphis, no? Yeah, it was a top 8 deck in Memphis, yeah.
Yeah, there was one. Yeah. So yeah, Florian's a consideration. I think. Yeah, I don't think I would bring this deck either. I think you're probably like a little less hopeless into KO than Enigma, but I don't know if you're good.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same boat. So I think to wrap this up, the deck to bring for this event is probably just KO. If you're not going to test that much of Sage, I would just bring KO. If you're gonna test a little bit, maybe Oldham or Ira might be interesting, but the KO ceiling is so high, it is just crazy. Like, if you ever experience a turn cycle where you start with like Wild Ride, Mandible Claw, Bear Fang, and like that doesn't use any equipment. It's like you pitch 2 blues, you go Wild Ride, Mandible Claw, Bear Fangs. 4 cards, 6, 9, what is it? 9 plus 8 is 17 plus a might token that you make. Just 4 card 18 is just crazy, and you get to do that like more than once in a game. So this deck is crazy.
Yeah, I have a kind of funny story. Peter Budensek won the showdown in Memphis, and he made a tweet about this. I feel comfortable sharing it. He basically was like, "Guys, I didn't make 2 and I don't have a deck and I haven't really played this format. What can I play?" He's like, "Oh, I don't know what decks I can borrow." I'm like, "I have KO built. I just built Jacob's KO deck from Brisbane, I believe." And then he's like, "Okay, I'm going to borrow the KO deck." And then he's looking, he's like, "How do I sideboard this deck?" So then I asked Jacob how to sideboard the deck and text him the notes. We also realized that I'm missing a buzzard helmet. So he borrows a buzzard helmet from Brody. And then Peter just shows up, has no reps on the deck, and then just wins the whole event. And he's just like, "This KO deck's great." So yeah, I mean, Peter's a very strong player, but I just thought it was kind of funny that he had like no cards, didn't know what to do, didn't know how to sideboard, and just like gets handed everything, wins the event.
Yeah, and there's gonna be a bunch of these super strong players who just gets to do this, right? They're just gonna bring KO. They're just gonna win games because the deck is so good.
Yeah, I think if you have reasonable fundamentals, you can probably pick up this KO deck with very few reps and do pretty well. A shout out to Peter, by the way. Yeah, Peter, good friend of mine. Cool to see him win the event. I just thought the story was really funny, and I think he did too because he tweeted about it.
I guess to close this episode off, what deck are you gonna bring for Sage, or what's the deck that you're thinking about bringing? Like, do you think you're just gonna bring KO?
I would like to not bring KO. I don't know if I want to play a bunch of KO mirrors. I think I would like to find another angle to attack, but I need to actually test this format. I think Oldham seems kind of likely. Maybe Ira, maybe Florian, maybe. I think those are kind of the heroes I'm considering. But yeah, most likely KO or Oldham, I would say.
Okay, that's pretty fair. Yeah, I'm locked in on Oldham. I've been testing a little bit with the Oldham KO matchup, and right now I feel very comfortable in that matchups, and I am not on sits anymore. I feel like
Okay.
that makes the KO matchup really, really good, but it makes your other matchups really, really bad because you don't have that much sideboard space in Oldhim. It was kind of what I have to say about the Oldhim deck is that your sideboard space is very tight, and if you need to make sure you beat the other decks that beat, like that try to beat you, you don't really have space for sit, in my opinion. I've been pretty comfortable beating KOs without sits so far, so I think I'm gonna take a risk and maybe not play sit. I'm gonna bring sits to Japan just in case, but I don't know if I'll register it.
And then CC, I think we've kind of said indirectly what we're playing, but what are you playing for CC?
Oh, Huntsman. I've decided this like long time ago. I've been on this deck for like 6 months now. Like I think this Huntsman is now getting to a point where I'm very comfortable beating most decks in the format. I think the hardest matchup, in my opinion, other than Gravy Bones, is Victor Goldbane. But I'm pretty comfortable now if it's the Victor's first time playing into me. I should have like a reasonably good chance at beating them if they don't know what I'm trying to do. So we will see. I don't know. I don't think Huntsman's the best choice to bring for this event, but I kind of locked in. I've kind of put way too much reps into it at this point that I think I'm just going to bring Huntsman.
Yeah, I think that's really reasonable. I think I'm most likely on Acilio. I am kind of considering Dash.io. I think I want to play a little bit with the Lens deck into the fatigue matchups, and if that feels comfortable enough, I could see a world where I wind up on Dash.io. But yeah, it's probably just those two decks. I've considered Victor. Seems good. I really don't enjoy the deck. I don't want to play Victor. Considered Marionette. Seems good. I also don't enjoy Marionette though. So yeah, I think largely going for the enjoyment factor because it's not super clear to me that one of these is way better than the other. And if it is, I won't figure it out until too late. As I said, I think being well practiced probably higher value than more optimal deck selection. So yeah, Acilio is probably my pick. I think I'm like 80% on Acilio at the moment.
Okay, yeah. We are recording still in March, so there is still going to be time to test and maybe change our opinions, but I'm leaving for Japan to have a small vacation beforehand, so we have to record a little bit earlier than what we usually do. And so we still have time to change our minds, right?
Yeah. This is immediately after calling Memphis, I guess, for context. Maybe we should say that at the start of the episode.
Oh,
but
we did. Yeah.
We did? Okay, cool. Yeah, so yeah, you're hearing us a little bit in the past, just because logistically we can't do it otherwise. But as we said, there's also no big events between now and then. So I think that this is kind of the understanding that everyone's going to be working under. And at the Pro Tour, we will see kind of where everybody lands or what various teams and testing groups and individuals wind up thinking is the right call for this tournament, and we'll see how it all unfolds. I think it's going to be an interesting event, but yeah, I think this is quite a good snapshot for Yokohama, and I hope that if you're prepping for that event or if you're wanting to tune in for coverage and say like what are the good decks, hopefully this helped give you some ideas of some of the decks in the format and our thoughts on those decks.
I think very last thing I want to say about PT Yokohama, I'm kind of disappointed that it's Sage. Like,
yeah,
man, Sage is not a good competitive format in my opinion. I think we said this quite a bit of times now on the podcast. I think Sage is a fun format to play. Shuffling it up and playing a game of Sage is fine. Playing casual games of Sage is fine. Playing Sage for stakes is kind of not what I think this game has been. It's not kind of where the core player base where that enjoys CC is. How do I say this better? I feel like Sage doesn't appeal to the player base that was appealed by CC, but it does kind of appeal to the more casual like TCG player base. I kind of wish that they need to kind of change the format of how Sage is played at these like tier 3, tier 4 events for to kind of like increase the integrity of the tournament is kind of like my opinion. Like, I don't know, best of 2, best of 3, something, like that doesn't kind of dilute the like your CC record essentially, right? Like your CC record is gonna get diluted by these 6 rounds of these Sage events, and I'm not gonna be happy if I like go 3-3 and then do like a really good and have a really good CC run and just like go 3-3 in Sage. That's gonna make me so disappointed in this event.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I am also not looking forward to the Sage portion of this event. I think that the format needed bans. I think it is unfortunate that the ban list we received has largely, in my opinion, just made the format worse. It is not more balanced and more diverse. I just feel like there was a bunch of decks that you could reasonably play that you no longer can. And that's like the biggest thing that the ban list did. So for me, ban list is a really big miss. And that kind of sucks. And I know that there's a lot of different things to balance. You need to bring new players and casual players into the game. Sage is good for the game. Competitive play is not everything. I know all of these things. It still kind of sucks. So yeah, I hope they can do something about it in the future. I think that, honestly, I think that 20 life constructed is just not good for competition. It's just too easy to do too much damage. That's honestly my opinion. I think that's very hard to fix this. I think maybe this is too late, but and I don't know that we'll see this, but I kind of wonder what Silver Age would have been like if it was like 60 card decks, adult heroes. You probably have to change some stuff. Like you probably have to ban the 4 blocks because fatigue probably, like you get 20 more cards, you get double the life total. You probably need to curate fatigue. But I wonder if something like that would have felt a little bit better, because I think that the 20 life constructed formats are just so, you either play a fatigue, like a hyper fatigue deck, and that's the only thing that it does, or you play 2 turns. And like those are kind of the only, it's very binary in that sense. And we saw this in Blitz, we see this in Sage, and I don't really think that there's a way to make this not the case whenever you're playing with a constructed deck in 20 life FAB.
Yeah, that's fair. I think one last thing maybe was that they could have done a PT Yokohama ban list where it only applies to just the PT Yokohama and doesn't apply to any other event. Like the showdowns doesn't apply to, locals doesn't apply to, just PT Yokohama Sage ban list could have worked.
Yeah. I also wouldn't have minded saying this where they just like, look, KOs do good. We want people to be able to bring this to their LGS and play it. We're making a unique puzzle for this Pro Tour to make the Pro Tour exciting and interesting. I think that would have been a step in the right direction. But
I think some other games does this. The biggest one would be Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Has like a world's ban list where it's because the game have different ban lists for different regions. And when they combine regions, they need to create a completely new ban list. So World is always played in a completely different format than what anybody is used to. And it kind of makes for an interesting watch. So, completely changing Sage just for this PT would have been an interesting choice, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, agree. Yeah. Bit disappointed, honestly. I don't want to complain too much. I think overall LSS does a good job and FAB is a good game, but yeah, Sage at Pro Tour Yokohama feels like a miss. And honestly, I don't know if I've talked to somebody yet that is going to the Pro Tour that feels good about Sage. I think it's only negative that I've heard, which is tough. For context, actually, I think I knew quite a few people, myself included, that actually enjoyed LL. I know LL was not well received by the community, so maybe some of the opposite problem. And there was a lot of people playing the event that didn't like LL, but some people liked it. And my current temperature read is that the vibes on Sage at the PT is worse than the vibes for LL at Worlds. So that's tough.
Mm-hmm. It's okay. We have draft back for PT Las Vegas, and I am excited for that. But oh my god, I lost the finals of the last ProQuest this weekend, so I am not qualified. It is the saddest thing that I've done, is losing a finals again for another PQ for Las Vegas. This is, oh my god. The most depressing thing. I need the top 32 Yokohama to even have a chance. I don't think it's happening. Oh my god, no.
Yeah. All right. I think that's going to be a wrap for this week's episode. We've talked a whole bunch. Hope you found it helpful. If you're going to Yokohama, good luck. See you there. feel free to come and say hi to us. We'd love to chat, love to meet you, or chat with you again if we've already met you in the past. And if you're not going to Yokohama, I hope you can enjoy the coverage and that you found this episode interesting. So yeah, good luck to everyone. We'll see you in Yokohama. And that's going to be a wrap. If you want to find us, Jay is on social media. He's at Ueda J on Twitter or X. I'm at Yuki Lee Bender on Twitter, as well as Blue Sky. Our Patreon is patreon.com/onthebobble. And we have an email where you can send questions on thebobble@gmail.com, or you can just reach out to us through our Patreon Discord. Those are kind of the best way to get your questions in. And I know that we have some questions on the back burner. It's going to be a while till we get to them because we sort of have the next few weeks of content lined up since we'll be out of town. But we will get to them. So if you do have questions, please submit them. We will get to them. And I think that following PT Yokohama will actually be the perfect time to get them kind of answered because we'll have a bit of a down season before we get into omens. So yeah, if there are things you'd like to hear about covered on the podcast and either full episodes or segments of episodes or whatever, just submit your questions through any of those channels and we'd love to hear from you. But that's going to be it for this week. We'll see you all next time.